I'm Nicole Fagan and I live in Kununurra in the East Kimberley of Western Australia. I'm coming up to 2 years up in WA, and I moved up from New South Wales. I came up for a job opportunity and for family reasons. So I had a very busy, thriving job where I flew around the state on private jets and worked for a very busy executive as his offsider. And yeah, life was great. And one day I was doing something as mundane as housework, and I slipped on wet polished concrete. So my 2 feet went airborne. Luckily, I crashed down first on my hip, and I then felt the back of my head impact on the concrete. I then felt my brain smash into my forehead. So as a result of that, I sustained a coup contra coup brain injury, front and back. And that was August 2023. So it's 13 months now, and I'm still in recovery. And life looks really different on the other side of that slip. Initially, when I took my fall, I was with my daughter. She was 5, so she went and got her dad and helped me up. And it might sound really cynical, but there was a lot of head injury presentations in this area, and I did not feel in a good way at all. And the last place I wanted to go was the hospital, to sit for hours on end, possibly because I just wasn't feeling like I could. So I didn't go, and I just thought, oh well, this is a concussion, so I'll just look out for for symptoms over the next 24, 48 hours. I'll monitor myself. I'll get my colleagues to monitor me, and off to work the next day I went. And it wasn't until a few days later I started getting tingling hands and feet, severe fatigue. I was losing words out of my speech. My vision was impaired. I had very full ears. I find a lot of symptoms are really hard to describe with concussion, because people might describe a dizzy sensation, but it's actually more of maybe an underwater sensation or something that doesn't really have a description at the moment. And I think anyone who has had a similar injury understand what I'm trying to say there. So I tried to reduce work a little bit, but I continued to work, and maybe 4 or 5 days later, I had a crash. I couldn't get out of bed, which I now know is quite common, that 4 or 5 day period. And from there, it's been a really quite a big recovery. I had a CT scan, that was normal. My GP didn't really know what to do with me, but I'm so grateful to her that she sought to understand with me. So she's been on that journey the whole time. So she discovered an occupational therapist who specialises in neuro OT down in Perth. So I did some telehealth with her, and then I've got a village around me. I've been to a vestibular optometrist. I have 3 different pairs of glasses to wear. I have a vestibular physio. So if people don't understand what that means, it's getting your balance back to normal. I've then had musculoskeletal physio for whiplash, chiropractic, nutrition. But my main focus has been getting my sleep patterns back to normal, because I find the minute I'm fatigued, my symptoms escalate. Even now. I had an exercise physiologist who got me back working out. I was walking 10 minutes a day, which I was terribly ashamed that that's all I could do. But that's where I started. The hardest thing about this journey, I would say, is not having a clear pathway, a clear timeline to the recovery. And, even something like cancer, you're going to go through a certain treatment. It might take X amount of time to recover. And then hopefully, there's a pathway out, all going well. This is entirely different. So for me, the hardest thing is still continues to be the unknowns. So I was being asked at work for return to work plans when, specifically when I would return full time, and no one could really understand, and I think this is part of the educational piece. No one could understand why all of these professionals could not estimate a return to full recovery. I think probably the hardest thing that I've ever seen on the page was my GP writing to my insurer and saying, Nicole's prognosis is unknown in terms of a timeline and whether she will reach full recovery. So that was a really difficult day. But I see progress all the time, and I feel like I'm really lucky because I've got to know people who have also had TBI, and it's a lonely journey. People don't understand it. People kind of think you're having a laugh. You might have gone home early because you were quite fatigued and you could have slept for 3 hours, but you've gone out for dinner because you couldn't be bothered cooking, but people see you out and then they judge you because, you couldn't do a day's work, but here you are socialising in the restaurant, you sure there's something wrong with you? So it's that whole invisible illness, and that's a lot of illnesses that there's not a lot of sympathy because there's not a lot of education still to be had. So that can be a bit tricky. I think people's views and education haven't been updated, possibly for decades, around this space. And the only thing that people hear in relation to concussion might be, a 22-year-old bloke going sailing into a goalpost head first, and, they have a male skull, they're youthful, they're fit, they're going to have a different recovery to, a menopausal woman with a softer, head, hormonal changes, neurodiversity, everything that you're facing in your recovery is different for each and every person, because every injury is different, where you're injured is different, and how your body can recover is different. So I would just really dearly love the health professionals to be brought up to date in their thinking. It's been really disappointing for me to have just present, say, to hospital for a different reason, and they ask your background and you say, I currently have post-concussion symptoms. And, that's highly unusual because that's usually like a 2-day thing. And that's coming from, a learned doctor. And the nurse would stand right next to him and agree. And it worries me because especially up here where there are so many head injuries, if that's your presentation to hospital, what's your recovery path going to look like? If that's what people assume, you can't heal a bone in 2 days. How are you going to heal a brain in 2 days? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And people don't necessarily connect the dots.